Welcome to No Life Till Lager, a show about lager beer, the brewers who make it, and we that drink it. This is a conversation between two people over one pint. My name is Adam Zuniga. I'm a failed master Cicerone. I'm part of the creative team behind the 6 Most Metal Breweries and Beer Like in Das Movie. My guest today is Tom Beckmann, the owner, the head brewer at Goldfinger Brewing Company in Downers Grove, Illinois. Welcome, Tom Nazdrovia.
Nazdrovia.
Oh,
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you for joining. It is truly an honor. I have always wanted to speak with a beer baron, and you are that. You're making that dream come true for No Life Till Lager. So, Tom, thank you so very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Ah,
I love talking lager, so thanks for having me.
well, let's talk some lager. So hashtag drink more lager, hashtag see you lager. Here is to an all lager brewery devoted from start to finish. Before we talk about you, before we talk about your family history and heritage, and before we talk about the brewery, let's speak to the beers in our hand. Can you tell me what you're drinking, please?
Absolutely. I have in this champagne-esque flute the Champagne of Poland, also known as the Grodzickia. It is the only style that the Poles ever created, beer style, I should say. And it's 100% oak smoked wheat malt with Polish hops, carbonated very high so that it's more champagne-like, and at 3.3 ABV, infinitely drinkable.
Infinitely drinkable. The fact that you are resurrecting and celebrating historical styles, we will get to that as well. It is rare to have a Grodzicki in America, if I'm even close to saying that right. And I didn't know there was an entire day devoted to it. So here's to the champagne of Poland. Um, I am drinking your Vienna lager, and I want to take a moment to appreciate how rare this style of beer actually is. Mm. Um, I think at one point or another, we have, there's beers like Brooklyn Lager,
Yeah,
like Boston Lager,
right.
even Dos Equis Amber that have been associated with Vienna Lager. And there might be some history and some truth to that, but it really does a disservice to the style. And I noticed in the last BJCP update, they became kind of more openly critical of the international amber lager style. Maybe critical is not the word, but a clear distinction from Vienna, because those beers just don't have the depth, the quality, and the character that your Vienna lager does. So still infinitely drinkable, as you said about your Grodzicki, but deep malt character from Vienna malt, which is unmistakable. So here again, thank you for resurrecting and attempting to master historical, maybe antiquated, maybe on the verge of extinction styles, and making them not only available, but available year round. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing with me. Cheers.
Well, cheers.
Mm. So Tom, we like to know our brewer. We know your brewery is a family operation, and I've seen that again and again on No Life Till Lager. It's only possible with the support of family, with the support of the most significant others. But beer is truly in your blood. So can you take us back a little further before we get to present day? Can you tell me about the Goldfinger family legacy dating back to the 19th century? I know you were brewers. I know you manufactured brewing equipment. You traded in hops. You malted barley. Did you have a choice, or did the beer choose you? Tell us about your family lineage and legacy, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did I have a choice? Well, I don't know. That's up for debate. I guess the reaction that I had to brewing my first homebrew batch, I'd like to say, was beyond just the enjoyment and satisfaction of having made a beer in my house. There was something deeper there that I felt because I never looked back after that.
Yeah.
And I think I'll just say part of it must have to do with what my ancestors were doing back in the 19th century, which was quite pioneering, given that in Poland, in Krakow, where their brewery was. This was pre widespread industrialization of beer in Poland, and we actually we have an artifact from our ancestors' manufacturing plant, which is a sample valve or a Zwickel that you would find on a fermentation tank or a lagering tank, and it's the valve that brewers would use to take samples, uh, do sensory analysis. So we actually have one of the 19th century sample valves that Marcus Goldfinger built, and on the back of it is a backing plate that has his emblem, and it says M. Goldfinger. And actually, we pay homage to that. If you can see in this glass, this is a illustration of that very sample valve, which we like to include on all of our cans. So
Oh,
that
I think I
valve
have it
was
here as
found.
well.
Yeah, you have it right there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
nice.
So it's a crazy story because I have a cousin in Warsaw who was doing some research on the Goldfinger's brewing history, which went from about the 1870s to right around the 1900s, when a lot of history was lost. And of course, in Poland, they were conquered many times in
Mm,
the 20th century. So finding out more information has always been difficult, but even more so because, of course, Nazis and then communists rolled in there, and they're not necessarily interested in the preservation of Polish specific history. So
mm.
thankfully, we have a few people who were able to dig up more information. But my cousin um, had come across this post, and it was somebody who had said that they were in the mountains of Poland looking for old bullet casings and stuff from World War II, and with a metal detector. And they dug up this sample valve and had no idea what it was. So my cousin, of course, seeing the Goldfinger name on it, said, "Well, that's part of my family's history." And so he ended up sending that to my cousin, and my cousin gifted that to me and my wife for our wedding.
Ah,
So we actually, in our brewery, not only have all of the history that we like to talk about, but an actual artifact from the manufacturing era. And to find a sample valve that far away from Krakow shows kind of how prolific Goldfinger beer was at the time.
incredible. Absolutely incredible. What a sense of living history. I think beer is one of the few things that really makes me feel connected to human history and humanity as a whole. And there's different takes on this. I'm not going to give beer total credit, but advances in industrialization, in pasteurization, in refrigeration, we're all driven by beer, and the sheer lengths that humans went to for the sake of making beer is nothing short of remarkable. And I like to think I can savor that a little bit in every sip. Definitely here with your Vienna Lager, that your brewery
That's beautiful.
picks
And
up
I,
where
I
your
totally agree.
ancestors, yeah, that your brewery picks up where your ancestors left off. That history survived despite multiple world wars and turmoil
Yeah.
across the European continent is exceptional. So, Marcus Goldfinger, wherever you are, here's to you. Thank you so very much for the Vienna I happen to be drinking today. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Goldfingers gradually migrated to the United States, how you found yourself in Downers Grove near
Yeah.
Chicago? Any other jobs you've had? Anything
Sure.
else before turning this passion, this legacy, this tradition into your profession?
Well, I would be remiss to not mention this full circle moment we just had over the weekend. We submitted our Grozickia to a international Grozickia competition, and it was the first time since 1898 ish that Polish people were drinking Goldfinger beer in Poland because that's where the
Amazing.
competition was held. And
Amazing.
I'm proud to say that we ended up winning silver medal for our beer. So really, really meaningful to all of us that we we're all the way in Downers Grove, Illinois now, and we managed to make our way back to Poland in a pretty big way.
That is absolutely incredible. Um, the fact that an American brewery won and you took silver next only to Live Oak out
Yes,
of Texas. The fact that two American breweries won in this style, which was, I
yeah,
think, resurrected in the States by home brewers seeking out kind of new
absolutely,
traditions as well as innovations within craft. And I know you've collaborated with Live Oak on
absolutely.
the Grodzicki style. Again, forgive the pronunciation. It's worth sharing that my wife is Polish. I strive to be a little bit more Polish each and every day. um, I certainly enjoy their beer. I certainly enjoy their food. I certainly enjoy the tradition. So I'm glad you are carrying it on. Congrats on
Thank
your
you,
win at a
thank you.
Polish brewery for International Grodzicki Day. And bring us up to present day. Tell us kind of what led you to this moment. Any
Yeah,
other jobs you've had, other experience you've had before gradually opening Goldfinger in 2020.
sure. I had mentioned before that I was home brewing, and that really came about just because I was living with my younger brother, Joseph, and he and I were really into exploring the culinary scene of Chicago, which is a great food city. And we were sort of inspired to start trying to do that on our own in our own apartment. So we were making food from scratch, anything that called for any recipe that called for some sort of thing that you could get in a can. We made sure we were doing it from scratch first, and
Nice.
really putting in a lot of passion and time into every meal we were making. And we also happened to be really into beer. So it occurred to us, why aren't we doing that with beer too? So we started home brewing together. I was really inspired by a porter recipe, so that was one of our first attempts to making a beer. And back then, it was probably the best beer I had ever tasted. But in hindsight, it's probably one of the worst beers I've ever brewed. But from that, I was just bitten by the bug of brewing, completely smitten by the entire process of brewing, and simultaneously getting in touch with our family that had pretty much we had lost touch with due to all of the turmoil in Poland. Because my even though I have Polish roots, my dad is actually from Colombia, South America.
Hmm.
When my grandparents survived the Second World War, they came back to Poland with nothing. No family essentially had survived, or very few.
Yeah.
A lot of that family were the Goldfingers, the Glucksmans. These were all our ancestors that were involved in the industry. So there was nothing for them, and they started a new life in Latin America. My dad met my mom through the Peace Corps. My dad's a physician. My mom's a nurse, and she was actually sent down to a remote village in Colombia where my dad was doing his residency, and that's how they met.
Wow.
And thanks to my mom, my dad was okay at English at the time, but she helped him write his application to the University of Chicago for a PhD program, and that's how we ended up in Chicago. And me and my siblings were the first born U.S. Of our family, because my mom was not American. Well, she was American, but she wasn't also not born in the United States at the time.
Hmm.
So it was we set roots here in Chicago. And when when I started homebrewing and really digging up more of our family history, from that moment I had set out to open Goldfinger Brewery. I didn't know
Hmm.
how I would do it. I didn't know if I would even ever get to a level where I could make a respectable enough beer to even do a brewery, but I knew that I was going to try my very best to get to that point.
Yeah.
So I enrolled in the World Brewing Academy, which is the program with Siebel Institute here in Chicago, and Domen's Academy in Munich, Master Brewers course, because I knew that there's no way I could homebrew my way to the knowledge that would be required to make really high level lager beer. So
Uh,
I went there, I graduated, and my first professional brewing job was at Lagunitas. You may be familiar with that brewery, being from
Lagunitas,
California.
Chicago,
Lagunitas, Chicago,
N-
exactly.
now defunct, I believe.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah,
I loved working there. It was quite the plant, and um, we were treated really well there.
yeah,
So it was an amazing place to be because I had no actual practical experience in a professional brewery.
mm,
Everything was theoretical. I had a degree in brewing. I had the theoretical knowledge, but the hiring practices of Lagunitas were more focused on finding that theoretical knowledge, that base that they could then grow from. And so I couldn't even flip a tri clamp on my first day, but learned it very quickly and was surrounded by incredible brewers. From there, I I knew that I needed something a little bit more applicable to what I believed Goldfinger would be, because we're not going to start Goldfinger with two twin 250 barrel brew houses.
sure.
Uh, a little bit smaller scale. So I was looking for other opportunities to work in a smaller brewery somewhere in Chicago. And there was an opportunity at the Hofbrauhaus in Rosemont, which is also no longer there. It's now Crust Brewing.
Mm,
But I had interviewed there for an assistant brewer position. Things didn't work out there for me, but the head brewer of Hofbrau used to be the head brewer of Emmett's Brewing Company, which is located in Downers Grove, and so he passed my resume over to them, and then I ended up becoming a head pub brewer for a couple of years in my hometown where I grew up. And sad to say, Emmett's is also closed. So, boy, I guess I'm leaving leaving some things in my wake now that I'm talking.
Ah,
I'm like, uh oh.
no, I think ultimately carving your own path, and I love to hear that you learned by doing. We all ultimately learn best by doing, and that Lagunitas gave you that opportunity. That all these breweries and organizations, whether they're still active or not, only furthered that opportunity. That speaks to the both the craft and the community surrounding these breweries. When I have been to Chicago, and while Lagunitas was active, it was really nice to see how it was embraced as a local brewery there, as a local employer there, and everyone I spoke to shared the same respect and enthusiasm that you just did. So that's wonderful. So many lives, many jobs, many breweries, but it's ultimately led you to the here and now. What happened next?
So we opened Goldfinger. I did eventually find a way to open it, and it was through the help of my siblings, who are also my partners, and my family. We decided, this is a family revival business. We need to all be involved and in some way, shape, or form. And we ended up opening our tap room on July 31st of 2020.
It's my
So
birthday. You opened on my birthday.
no way. Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
That's
July
great.
31st. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, all in good company then. Goldfinger, Harry Potter, myself, I think
There
Wesley
you go.
Snipes. That's wonderful. I will have to celebrate a future birthday with you. Great.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. I'll buy you a Goldfinger beer here.
Please. July
Um,
31st, 2020.
yeah.
Questionable year,
Oh,
obviously,
yeah.
for anyone to embark on anything new. And the fact that you survived is a testament to the quality, to the tradition, to everything you're doing to this day, 5 years in. And I know your fifth Lagerversary is coming up in July.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to? So, first of all, I love, of course, that you're rooted in home brewing. I love, of course, that you're rooted also in food. Beer is food. Beer is agricultural. Beer is agriculture. Beer is a food product. It's often kind of discarded
Absolutely.
as an industrial. product. It is a living, breathing thing. So I love that you were experimenting with food, with cuisine, with cooking, and that eventually translated to home brewing, to brewing your own beer. I love the professional path and the schooling. Of course, Siebel is an absolute industry leader, training you ultimately to open Goldfinger. And then you open on my birthday in July 31st in 2020. And of course, the rest of the world shut down over the course of 2020. Can you speak a little bit to those challenges and how you
Oh yeah.
survived to this day?
Oh yeah. In 2019, August of 2019, when we broke ground on the brewery, it was an awesome time to open a brewery.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Uh, a mere few months later, it became not a great time to open a brewery. We had originally hoped to open in March, actually, of 2020, when everything shut down. So that was a crazy experience because um, the progress on building the brewery came to a screeching halt.
Hmm.
Very, very difficult to get our tradespeople in and out of like supply houses because they were used to just, pulling up and loading their vans. Now they needed to make appointments. There were
Yeah.
limited appointments, etc. So it was a very scary time for us just because all the money was going out the door to build this with uncertainty whether or not we'd actually be able to open. And if we did, what does that even look like? Um,
Yeah.
we were saved by the fact that we're in this residential area of Downers Grove, but in this little kind of industrial pocket. So we have people living across the street on both sides of our building, but we have this big parking lot. And so we converted that to a temporary outdoor seating place. And that's how we survived. We were one of the only outlets nearby where people could just get out of their house and safely drink beer and just breathe fresh air.
That's
And
wonderful.
so thankfully, we had a very positive response to the fact that we were just pouring lager beer. Um,
Mm.
I think the idea that people wanted to stay a little longer at a place because they really didn't have many options to go enjoy beers elsewhere. We had the types of beers that definitely lend themselves to more sessions, longer sessions. You were able to leave the parking lot after a few beers and not be stumbling. So
Yes.
I think that helped. I think the fact that we literally only had 3 beers when we opened and we ran out of 2 of them within like the first month and a half. So we
Ah,
were actually down to 1 beer at one point. I think that was a really clear and easy message for us. People were being talked at literally every moment of every day during COVID. Nobody knew what was going on and how they should behave. And
yes.
we were just like, look, you don't have to think about anything. We got 3 options. If you want to learn more about what goes into it, I'll talk all day about it. Otherwise, you can drink our Vienna lager if you like malty. You can drink our pills if you want a little bit of a hop bite, or you can just drink our original lager, which is a Helles. It's just an easygoing lager, and that was it.
Yeah.
People loved that. They didn't have that sensory overload of going to a place with 20 different taps.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Not just that you gave customers and your community an outlet and an escape uh, from COVID, from the pandemic, from all the chaos happening around us, but that in that moment it supported what sounds like a business plan that you've obviously carried through to present day. Was from the moment you were homebrewing, and then when you did work professionally at Lagunitas and everywhere else, was the mission and the vision behind Goldfinger always all lager? Was it to produce all lager beer at your own brewery from the very start, or did that evolve over time?
It evolved a little bit. Being heavily focused on lager and traditional beers was always part of the plan. There was actually a brief moment in when I was in Germany, uh, doing just like a Helles, a Pils, and a Hefeweizen.
Hmm.
So very much a German kind of focused concept. So it was always very lager centric. The all lager thing came about for various reasons. One being that lager beer has always been my favorite style.
Yes.
Even though I was brewing more IPA than I still have brewed at Goldfinger when I was at Lagunitas.
I'm
Um,
sure.
I I I I've always had an affinity for lagers, and so I think it made sense for the market at the time. It was also a concept that had been proven very successfully by Bierstadt in Denver,
Mm.
whom I revere and respect. And Allison and I had the opportunity, my wife Allison and I had the opportunity to visit Bill and Ashley and share some beers together. And so it was an idea that we had toyed with, and then to be able to actually go into a place that had done something similar and had success was probably the most encouraging thing that pushed us to kind of ditch the idea of having a Hefeweizen or any ale style and really just stay focused on lager beer.
Shout out to Ashley and Bill and Bierstadt. Her name keeps coming up. She was one of our first episodes, and still one of the lasting, because when we talk about breweries that opened up devoted to lager, kind of in the late 20 teens. She was among the first. And then I've spoken to a few breweries since, like you, that opened up in 2020, that opened up in 2021, despite all odds.
Yep.
Or for that matter, even breweries that are opening this year devoted to lager beer in what's considered a very challenging climate for small breweries for craft beer. And to me, it just gives me hope and faith in the future of this industry, that you survived and that more keep coming.
Me
Um,
too. Yeah, that is so encouraging to hear.
yeah.
And it all
And
sorry, go ahead.
the fact, since you've opened, you continue to rack up accolades. I know you recently took home what looks like a professional wrestling belt from the Legends of Lagerfest, run by the Chicago Beer Society. You were among the top choice breweries of 2025. You continually win awards from Craft Beer and Brewing, best beers year over year. I know your Bach took it in 2024. So you have been recognized every single year since you've been open, as has Bierstadt for their slow pour. And I know you have your own interpretation of that, as of a number of the breweries I've talked to that are managing to survive despite a pandemic, despite a challenging climate for small brewers. I think that speaks to your business plan from the very beginning. And if it wasn't a plan, it speaks to your own taste in lager beer.
Absolutely. Well, I I'm very humbled that we've received recognition because I I never really set out to try to acquire accolades. And admittedly, like we do participate in some competitions, but that's rarely our priority, and we're not always submitting beers because I think I'm my own harshest critic, and the biggest motivator we have for sending beers into competitions is to try to get a professional opinion that is not influenced or biased by anything that we do,
Yeah.
because how else are we going to improve there? But to actually receive some really positive feedback is incredibly encouraging, not only to me but our production staff. I mean, that is a very rewarding thing to them,
Yes.
and so uh, brewing brewing the beers that we've done, focusing on lager, has helped us improve our process over the last 5 years. I think that this doesn't happen to me every day, but certainly in the back of my mind, I know that what we're doing here is I'm the flag bearer for the Goldfinger family and
Yes.
the legacy that had all but disappeared. And so I feel an added pressure beyond just my own uh, expectations to make sure that what we're doing here is representative of what I believe was uh, what motivated Marcus Goldfinger, and part of that also to talk a little bit about why we focused on lagers is
Please.
that they were also brewing lager beer. We have documentation that they brewed a special Bock beer for Kaiser Wilhelm's first visit to Poland. So
Amazing.
so not only did we want to make lager beer, but it helped to have really awesome breweries in the United States doing it already. So that's kind of what pushed us over the edge.
Yeah. We're all trying to make sense of who we are, what we do, and why. And the fact that you can point to your ancestors and look over a century back and pick up the story where it left off, and again preserve that tradition, preserve that heritage. It's more than most of us can say. Um, can you speak a little bit, just what did that turning point mean? So if the Goldfinger family was brewing a Bock, and we saw Czech Pilsner appear in 1842. We saw the
Yep.
Vienna Lager style I'm drinking appear around 1848, 1841. Just what kind of shift was that in beer and in brewing at the time, and how did lager differ from what people had been drinking historically? And to bring that full circle, can you also just kind of maybe compare now to then, just in recent years of craft beer? It's
Yeah.
incredibly it's different to have a flagship beer, a series of core beers. It's different to be drinking lagers as opposed to like an endless variety, or maybe not so endless variety of IPAs, frankly. So tell us a little bit of now and then. What did this shift in lager drinking mean for your ancestors in the mid 19th century? What does it mean now from 2020 to
Sure.
2025 on?
Yeah. The timing of their brewery was in the wake of the proliferation of lager beer across Europe, and much of that is due to the advent of indirect kilning of malt to create um, paler malt that was invented by the Brits. And so you had this combination of a new malt that had never existed before that was pale in color, which is very attractive to the eye. But then you have a couple of brewers from Munich and from Vienna who end up stealing those secrets, and there you go, exactly. Um, Anton Dreher, specifically of Vienna, takes this technology back to Vienna, where he's experimenting with this new malting technique, and he develops the Vienna malt, which, given his proximity to Bohemia, was originally quite Pilsner-like. So traditional Vienna beers would have been brewed with Vienna malt, but also with Czech Saaz hops. So it would have this maltiness, but also this spicy character, which ours does.
Yes.
So while the malt on the malt front, technology is allowing for these different styles, you also have uh, Josef Groll from Germany, who gets sent to Pilsen, and thanks to their incredibly soft water, this combination of soft water, pale malt, and this yeast that has just kind of evolved into what lager was, because without getting into too technical with lager yeast, it only exists in the wild. They've ever found in Patagonia. That was the only place they ever found actual Saccharomyces pastorianus.
Wow.
Um, the theory is that it had evolved in Bavaria and in Czechia over the course of centuries, being or at least 10, yeah, I would say about 100 years of being stored in cold conditions in cellars, that these yeast cells needed a way to evolve. And so You had top fermenting yeast in close proximity to another varietal, which is Saccharomyces eubayanus, which thrives in very cold temperatures. And then they start to mate, and they develop the most delightful yeast strain that has ever braced us, and that
How
is the lager
romantic.
yeast strain.
Uh,
So, so you have
there's a
all
happy
these
ending to
things.
that.
Yes, exactly. You have all these things happening around the mid, uh, around like the 1850s, and then you have Louis Pasteur with his ability to isolate different yeast strains, and so all of that just took off, and it made its way to Poland, and that's where Goldfingers started to make beer using these new techniques, and it's only improved from that point. I've done a lot of research in some historical styles. So you mentioned in the past what lager beer had meant for Goldfingers. Well, Andreas Krenmer, who is an author of the Vienna Lager book,
Hmm.
came to visit us last year because he was so encouraged by the fact that I used his book as inspiration to create what I thought could be the most original historical Vienna lager that we brew once a year. So he came to visit, and on his way home, he went to the Polish archives and dug up some history, and actually found a list of a meeting of brewers. And the first one of the brewers in Pilsen who was making the very first Vienna lagers was on the same list as Marcus Goldfinger. So these two were
Incredible.
contemporaries sharing ideas, brewing lager beer. So incredibly meaningful for our history. And now you
Yeah.
fast forward to today, and after the after lager beer becomes a commodity in the United States for too long, and
Hmm.
and the care and attention into the production seemingly goes by the wayside and is focused more so on the commercialization of it and advertising. People were itching for something with meaning,
Yeah.
and admittedly, who didn't like lager beer growing up? Who wasn't drinking lager beer uh, even before they were able to legally drink? Like,
For
lager
sure.
beer is usually the gateway to beer for like most Americans, I would say. But it took a long time for me personally to realize uh, what that what that actually could be beyond some of the commodity lagers. And I often credit my dad because he went to a conference with the founder of Victory Brewing when I was a kid, and the founder gave him a 6 pack of Prima Pills that he brought back,
I love that
and
beer.
my dad would drink one of those after mowing the lawn, and I was more interested in the fact that they had this really cool blue cap with a red V on it, because I was saving bottle caps. He let me try it though, and I'll never forget. It was the most bitter thing I had ever
Ah.
consumed. But I was surrounded by a lot of imports. My dad, being an immigrant, was drinking all sorts of imported beers and drinking Prima Pills when he could. So I at least had some kind of foundation of what lager could be, uh, and so we set out to help with that conversation and help bring attention to various styles of lager, and hopefully a newfound appreciation for those types of beers.
Supremely well said. You're absolutely right that lager beer had become a commodity, kind of like American cheese, at one point. And it's
Like the
thanks
craft
to
singles.
yes, yeah, and it's thanks to these gateway beers. You cited Prima Pills. Shout out to Victory for that. For me, it was Anchor Steam, and I remember when I first tried it, it was the most intensely bitter thing I'd ever had. And like
Yeah.
a moth to the flame, I just wanted more and more and more. And again, it's not to throw shade at breweries that had been an interpretation or maybe an attempt at resurrection of the Vienna lager style, for example, like Brooklyn Lager, like Boston Lager, like Dos Equis Amber, maybe Yingling, although that's always been a decidedly American amber lager, and proud of it.
Yes.
Um, but again, for a while, I didn't think I liked Vienna lager as a result. It didn't have the complexity, the character, the malt notes, and kind of the thoughtful depth that your own does here. Um, so
Thank you.
that this wave of breweries, talking about Bierstadt, talking about like Victory, talking about Jack's Abbey, I believe you've collaborated with them as well. And of
Absolutely.
course, now talking about Goldfinger, are really picking up the torch, and it's burning brighter than ever before.
Hmm.
Um, there's more to this story as well. I think you're picking up not only historic traditions and holidays like Grozicki Day, and the beer in your hand has to be one of the most handsome I've ever seen. What an elegant presentation.
Thank
Um,
you.
I think you've also created, I don't know if this is also rooted in history, but you've created a dark lager day, which is my
Uh,
absolute favorite style of beer that I can sip and savor endlessly. I don't know if that was that your own invention, or is that also rooted in some story, some fable, some family past?
uh, no, it's not rooted really in history. I mean, around that time is Starkbierfest, but admittedly, I had forgotten about Starkbierfest, even though I was actually part of that when I was in Germany. I went to like a festival. It's like a Bach winter festival in Germany. That was not the inspiration for Dark Lager Day. Dark Lager Day came about because I adore dark lagers. I told you that porter was the first recipe that I ever brewed at
Yeah.
home. I am a huge coffee fan. I drink too much every day.
Yes.
Um, but it's because I genuinely like roasted chocolate kind of flavors in beverages. And so dark lagers to me are the quintessential, uh, honestly, year round lager beer.
Hmm.
It is what lager beer was before pale malt was created. So you had Dunkles, you had Schwarzbier. And so I knew from the very get go we were going to be making dark lagers. We were going to make a Baltic porter. And in 2021, we had, honestly, we had not planned a dark lager day, but it just so happened that we had a Doppelbock, which is
Hmm.
one of my favorite styles, and a Schwarzbier in the tank at the same time. And I'm talking with my wife Allison, and we're kind of laughing at the fact that we have two beers that probably aren't top sellers in the market today,
Fair enough.
but two beers that we absolutely adore. And so I said, well, why don't we just bring attention to the fact that it is sort of an obscure realm of beer, dark lager, and let's just release them at the same time. And we released it on, like, I want to say it was a Wednesday, and we barely posted about it. We were just like, hey, we have these two beers, so come enjoy dark lager day. And we got completely slammed unexpectedly, and we were understaffed because we had no idea that many people liked to drink dark lagers. And
Nice.
so from that moment on, we set out to create an actual celebration of dark lagers, which we do every February when we release our Schwarzbier, our Doppelbock, and then we rotate a third dark lager every year. And every year it has gotten bigger. Uh, our first year we were just in our tap room. Our second year we were in our tap room and brewery. Now we're in the tap room, the brewery, and outside with fire pits and food and all this really fun stuff. So if I had any opportunity I have to promote dark lagers, I'll take.
Excellent. That is an example of, if you build it, they will come. And I love that you're giving the people of Chicagoland, of the Midwest, an alternative to Dark Lord Day, for example.
Well,
Uh,
yes, good. Thanks for reminding me. That was definitely also kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing because Uh, I forgot there was a conversation I think I had with Jeremy, our brewer, and he was talking about Dark Lord Day, and I was like, well, you can go to Dark Lord Day. I'm gonna have Dark Lager Day, and then it was like, oh, we should just run with Dark Lager Day.
And there is some symmetry and a little bit of the kind of the way you present and brand, like your Doppelbock, the Schwarz beer. I think it was a Polotomave, maybe this
Hmm.
last February as well.
Yes,
But again, that you're contributing, that you're continuing to innovate and bring some drama and some spectacle and some fanfare to what would be considered a historical style, maybe styles that were at risk of going extinct, and bringing them to a modern day craft beer audience, not even a craft beer audience, just to a modern day audience, speaks volume. So if you build it, they will come. I'm so glad you got that reception. Maybe can you take us on like a quick date in Downers Grove? Just tell us a little bit about your immediate surrounding community. We know you gave people an outlet during COVID, during the pandemic, thanks to your parking lot, thanks to your outdoor, what became a beer garden. But, what is it about Downers Grove and what is it about the Chicago area that has a thirst for lager that helps Goldfinger not just survive, but thrive and persevere?
sure. I have. I had mentioned I grew up here, so that certainly had an influence on where we decided to finally open Goldfinger
Mm.
because of the familiarity we had with the town. But Chicago has a long history of lager beer.
Yes.
Um, it's been a hub for lagers for so long. It's also the biggest metro area between two of the largest breweries in the world, Miller and Anheuser-Busch,
Ah,
Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis.
yeah.
So lager is a very familiar thing around here. Um, we're in a town, it's a suburb of Chicago that has an express train to Union Station in Chicago that gets you there in 22 minutes. So Downers Grove has been a very attractive place for a lot of people who work in the city to move to because it's quieter, it's slower. There you can have a yard here if you want to have a home.
Yeah.
So for a long time, this has been a place where people who work in Chicago actually live. And when I was living in Chicago, there was a peak of people going back into the city around I would probably like 2005 to 2015. There was this huge uptick in suburbanites moving back into the city.
Mm.
Um, the city had gotten a lot cleaner, safer. It was really nice. And then I think because of COVID, there's this new exodus from Chicago again.
Mm.
And so our community in Downers Grove is highly sought after. It's one of the older suburbs, so it's very built up already, so that there's not a ton of inventory here. So when there is, it goes in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
So we've really benefited from that because a lot of people want to be in this area and it's pretty accessible. It's not too far from Chicago. And thanks to that, even people who come visit Chicago from elsewhere find it fairly easy to come visit us.
Oh, that's wonderful. Whenever I've been in Chicago, it's just a living, beating, vibrant city and everything surrounding it. I can tell I'm in a city of the world. And I can tell beer drinking matters there. I know you extend the Dark Lager Day festivities and celebration to Hop Leaf, which is
Oh,
probably
yeah,
one of the greatest surviving craft beer bars in the country.
absolutely.
So a healthy drinking tradition in Chicago, and clearly Downers Grove for that matter. Um, and they keep coming back for more. I think so. You've had a series of three, or maybe you started with two and then three, and now ultimately four core beers And maybe we can find a better word for that down the road. Right now, core is the distinction for a flagship, for something that you brew
Yeah.
year round. I think what it was originally your original lager, a Helles, a Pils, the Vienna I'm drinking now,
Yeah.
and you include a Mexican style lager as well, which I enjoyed the other night. Thank you for that.
Oh, sure.
Um, so here again, as the commitment to lager evolved for your brewery, were you always intent on making a series of beers that would be always available? And how did you land on these fundamental styles?
Yeah. We definitely started with the first three that you mentioned, the original, the Pills, and the Vienna. The thought behind that was we wanted to cover a variety of flavor spectrums. Uh, and a lot of my brewing knowledge comes from Germany. So we were focusing heavily on German styles. And it was also inspired by kind of the uh, the big breweries of Munich,
Hmm.
who do keep things very simple. They only brew a few beers, and those beers also cover a nice variety of flavors. And typically, they have a Helles. Some of them make a Pils. Most of them have a Dunkel, and then most of them have a Hefeweizen. So since we weren't going to be brewing a Hefeweizen, we knew we wanted to do something. We needed to have something malty and light, but still very drinkable. And between Dunkel and Vienna, I'm partial to Vienna. I prefer that style a little bit more than Dunkel. I think, generally speaking, I like the toastiness of Vienna malt and the fact that it's a little bit lighter on its toes than Munich malt.
Yeah.
So that's how we decided on that being the one that we use, the one that we offer to people that would give them more of a toasty, deeper malt character. Um, my favorite style, though, is Pils and German style specifically.
Hmm.
And I knew one of the fondest memories I have of Germany was sitting at the Tegernseer monastic brewery on the Tegernsee in the Alps of southern Bavaria, drinking this pills. The funny thing about this pills is it's just a memory. I haven't had it in like 5 or 6 years, but
Uh-huh.
I think the fact that I had had Helles by the liter every day that I was there, and all of a sudden I get this smaller glass of this beautifully aromatic pills. It was just mind blowing. And
Yeah.
so I knew that I wanted to try to recreate that memory that I had. And so our pills is inspired by that memory. I'm not saying to go get a Tegernseer pills and compare it to Goldfinger pills because I couldn't tell you if it's close anymore, but it
Yeah.
certainly is how I remembered it. And so
Yeah.
that's how we decided on the pills. And then Helles is the best beer. You can't beat a Helles for any occasion.
Yeah.
There's some beers that are better suited for other occasions, but Helles is always the best suited beer for every occasion.
Here's to
So
Helles, a beer made for drinking.
a beer made for drinking, and it was the first pilot batch that we had brewed. My wife and I brewed it in my parents' garage when we were toying with different beers to open Goldfinger with, and that was the first one we did. We did a single decoction, as we always have. Um, at home, we spunded it, naturally carbonated it, did all the things that we knew we were going to do at Goldfinger. And we actually ended up serving that very first batch at our wedding as like a welcome beer to everybody. And everybody loved it. Of course, they were probably a little biased. It was our wedding day,
Yes.
but but that's always been Goldfinger beer, our original.
What a sense memory to associate. First of all, I can relate to everything you said about drinking Helles than pills in German beer gardens. Part of my story as well. and then a happy ending to your story, to again being a family affair, a husband and wife duo, that your Helles was your wedding beer. I mean, how can you not think of that with every sip, every time?
Exactly.
Um, for these beers, I'm trying to, as we do each episode of No Life to Lager, everyone has kind of a fundamental understanding of how lager beer is different. It's fermented by lager yeast, maybe cold conditioned for a period of 30 days. But can you tell us a little bit more about your process and how Goldfinger might differ from some of the devoted lager breweries that might have come before you and those that will come after you? And you mentioned some of that before. I know you're a brew house built for decoction. We'll talk more about that. Natural carbonation. I don't know if that's all through Spunding or if you also use Kreuzening. Horizontal lagering tanks. I always love to ask people if that's for show or if they are genuinely committed and believe that it's ultimately better for the beer and the fermentation process. Just tell us a little bit more about what makes Goldfinger unique and distinct. I think you typically lager from anywhere from 60 to 90 days, if not up to 6 months for your Oktoberfest. So
Yep.
just speak a little bit more to your process, please.
Sure. Uh, I think one thing that a lot of brewers don't talk a lot about when we discuss what makes their beers is our own unique palate.
Mm,
Um, I think that all of us taste things a little bit differently. There's commonality in what we taste, but um, how that taste translates to the experience, the internal experience, whether emotional or physical, is uniquely our own. So I like to think that while we're making styles and following procedures that exist in many breweries around the world, there's really only one place where you can combine all of those processes through the lens of Goldfinger or me personally and the people around me that I whose palates I trust. And so that's what shapes our beer more than anything else, more than the process is what do we think tastes good, and um, and that's what ultimately the approval of us passing the beer along. Uh, and thanks to having a foundation of knowledge as we taste things that we like or dislike, we at least can go back and reference things in our procedure that we could alter to achieve whatever it is that we are seeking to achieve. But I'm a musician at heart. I've played music all my life. I've played in bands. I'm a very emotional guy. And a lot of Goldfinger's business decisions and beer decisions are really gut instinct and things that I I emote. And
Yeah.
so that's our beers are basically mine and my wife's and our team's emotions in a glass. And you'll only find that set of emotions here. It's not the only good set of emotions, but that's what our beer is.
So
Sorry
well
to not
said,
get too
Tom.
technical. I don't know if you
No,
wanted me to get into
actually,
technical
uh,
stuff, but
no, you took me by surprise, and you're giving me chills, Tom. For this interview, I knew I had to kind of do my research and up my game because I know how invested you are in the brewing process and how deeply rooted you and your family are in lager brewing. There is no shortage of creative people in beer giving creative expression to beer. I love that you're a musician and that brewing beer is a further expression of music, of your creativity, of your personality. I really appreciate you speaking to the human element behind the brewery that you won't find anywhere else. And once again, just want to cite the fact that beer, at its best, it is not an industrial product. It is an agricultural product, and it is a human expression, and it is creative expression. So thank you so very much for
Mhm.
sharing that with us, my friend. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Um, One thing we should cite as well, because it is unusual for a brewery your size, you do have committed sustainability efforts and a lot of different projects um, in the works. I know
Yeah.
you use less water to clean your brewery.
Yes.
You reuse carbonation, ultimately minimizing your carbon footprint through the schmunding process. You recycle spent grain, as do many breweries. Try to use chemicals that are not harsh for the environment.
Yes.
Your delivery
Non-phosphoric.
van, your lager jogger runs on diesel fuel. And the one thing I absolutely want to talk about is the fact that you have a bat box at your brewery. You have bats helping to contain the elements. Can you just speak a little to any or each of these?
Yeah.
Just tell us, as a small business and as a small brewery, how are you finding the time and the commitment to the environment and the sustainability practices?
Yeah. I have some updates on some more stuff we haven't listed on our website yet.
Please.
And as you know, it's always there is a barrier to entry for certain things on a small scale. There's just the technology doesn't exist for small breweries on a lot of things that some of the larger breweries get to take advantage of. But
Mhm.
where we can, we think about that. And it comes from various places, but I think fundamentally my upbringing has always been in nature. It's where I feel most comfortable, and being able to go on hikes, being able to swim in wild ponds and lakes, and just having that experience has given me an appreciation for Mother Earth,
Mhm.
and uh, it's something that shouldn't be taken for granted. And of course, it's difficult. It requires sometimes more money, but certainly more consideration to do it properly. And I am far from not being a wasteful human. I certainly create plenty of waste in my life, but it is something that I'm always thinking about. And the chemical thing, for example, was something that I learned from working at another brewery, because we had actually Downers Grove had come in and asked to analyze our chemicals, and they had no rule against using phosphorus, uh, high chemicals, high concentrations, and we were using some of those. But this really nice guy from the village was explaining to me that eventually that runs into the Mississippi and then into the Gulf of Mexico, and then it creates algal blooms that stifle the oxygen of those bodies of water and is really bad.
Mhm.
And so when I was seeking a contract with a chemical company for Goldfinger, that was my number one priority. What chemicals can we use that aren't going to be harmful to the environment? Um, so there are a whole bunch of other things that just I've learned in other breweries. I had the great advantage of being educated in Germany, where they tend to have they tend to pay more attention to sustainable practices. So I was able to see technologies that exist for that. And so in our recent expansion that we underwent last year for our production side, we built infrastructure, some piping, and some electrical, and some other infrastructure that we need to bring in a small CO2 reclamation plant, which we are not quite at the barrelage that it makes sense for us to bring in, but it's there. We got a spot reserved for when we reach that barrelage, that we're going to start reclaiming our CO2, cleaning it up, and using it in the rest of our process. Because although we reduce our CO2 usage by naturally carbonating, we still have to use CO2 and some of the other aspects of our uh, production. So we're going to try to eliminate those as much as we can. Um,
Amazing. Amazing. Are any of your beers force carbonated or all? Naturally carbonated.
all are naturally carbonated, and they're you asked about krausening. We will
Hmm.
be krausening our first beer, a beer we made yesterday, because we're doing a new process on a. Every year we do a hoppy lager and we dry hop it, and we've experimented in various ways of dry hopping. This is the first dry hopping method that we're going to use that's actually going to allow the CO2 to dissipate entirely from well, almost entirely from the initial fermentation. But instead of force carbonating it, we're going to pull off some actively fermenting beer into the lagering tank after the dry hop to naturally carbonate it through krausening. But
Amazing.
everything else we've done just through natural carbonation, just by spunding. Um,
Amazing.
and then most recently, I was at CBC and met some Aussies who care about the planet too. And they had developed this pallet wrap, this reusable pallet wrap, and this reusable keg ratchet strap wrap. And we self distribute our beer. And you got to be able to secure the beer down on a pallet to put in the
Yeah.
van. And the most practical and most used way is through plastic wrap, shrink wrap, basically. But it's such a waste, and it kills me every time we throw a clump of that away after a distro route. Well,
Yeah.
we purchased these reusable ones, which are better anyway for securing the beer. But now we are eliminating the use of that plastic in our self distro routes.
That's incredible. And what might sound like a small detail is actually a major step forward for any brewery invested in sustainability. And just the fact that you're thinking about this and making efforts on par with, what like what a Sierra Nevada would do, what an Allagash would do. These are breweries known for being committed to environmental sustainability.
Yeah,
But they're also massive. They're
they're
also
massive.
massive in brewing to a scale that, they have many more resources, and as such, like a lower barrier to entry, to get some
Yeah,
of the kind of equipment you're talking about. And you work off of, like, how many barrels is your system? How many barrels do you typically release a year?
we have a 15-barrel brew house.
Hmm.
Uh, we have 15-barrel fermenters and 30-barrel fermenters, and we have a few 15-barrel horizontals, uh, a bunch of 30-barrel horizontals, and we just put two 60-barrel horizontals in last year at the end of the year. So we're gonna produce roughly 2,000 barrels this year. We've grown every year. We're very small still. Part of that is because we're making lager beer, and our tank residency is double what the average ale brewer uh, produces. So
It's
we have,
precious real estate.
yeah, and we have so many more tanks to make only 2,000 barrels than most breweries. So it's a huge capital investment. We have limited resources, so we got to just inch along and try to grow organically, and grow in a way that doesn't force us to turn over tanks faster than we want to. I think that's one of the things that we're absolutely committed to is we do want to grow, but one thing you hear way too often is that growth sometimes leads to inferior quality, and
Mhm.
we refuse to accept that as the rule. And so we're going to be hopefully growing slowly but surely.
Yes. Um, Small but mighty, growing slowly but surely. I will reiterate again, years ago, I would hear so many brewery owners talk about, um, the fact that they could turn over two or three ales, two or three IPAs in the time of one lager beer, like it was this profound business decision that they'd made or stumbled upon. And in recent years, that we see more people taking the single most valuable resource, which is time, and investing that in lager. Like I said, gives me a lot of hope and a lot of faith in the future of this industry, and proving that you can succeed doing it. And again, kind of everything surrounding your brewery with the environmental practices, the sustainability practices, you're proving you can do it on a small scale for the sake of continued future growth. So thank you for your service, Tom. Um, and before we move on to a couple of just kind of rapid fire ending questions, I love to ask everyone just to see how they reply. We've spoken a lot about your brewery. We've spoken to your process. We've spoken to your history. And just tell us a little bit about the taproom experience you want people to have who are showing up to Goldfinger today, for that matter. I know you partner with local food trucks and often have like Polish and German food on site. You do
Yeah.
a first Tuesday fast tapping of a gravity keg,
Hmm.
first Tuesday of each month. Just tell us a little bit more about your taproom experience, what you want people to enjoy, why they should make the trip to Goldfinger, what can they only have at the brewery, and what do you want them to take from your taproom?
Yeah. I mean, that's our bread and butter. That's
Hmm.
that's what has allowed us to grow. So the tap room is hugely important to us, and uh, we try to create a welcoming environment for everybody. And the way that we try to achieve that is begins with the staff that we hire. Um, I I had mentioned that I love coffee, and I have been going to craft coffee shops forever
Yeah.
because there a lot of them in Chicago are absolutely delicious. But I have to say that the customer experience that I've gleaned from a lot of my visits has been subpar. There's almost not everywhere, but there's almost this kind of arrogance or off-putting quality that I had encountered in my exploration of coffee
Mm.
and my exploration of different ways of drinking it, different flavors. And I'm a tough guy, so I can handle that. But I definitely walked away thinking like, hey, I'm a really curious person about coffee. And the people behind the bar couldn't care less about my interest in it. In
Yeah.
fact, they're not actually being nice when
Yeah.
I'm asking questions. So Allison, my wife, had shared a very similar experience. So that was sort of fundamental to the vibe that we were going to put off in our tap room. Is there's no stupid question, there's no ignorance. Questions are good. We want to know what people are curious about, and we want to share the our craft in the most accessible way possible and customize those experiences based on who's asking the question. So we actually hire people from all walks of life, but many teachers, because we feel that teachers have to do that on a daily basis, customize their care for each student and be attentive. And they're educating people, meaning that there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot
Wow.
of
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah.
So we like to bring from that pool of people. Also, there's no pretension in their beer knowledge. Most of the people we bring in aren't the most educated in beer when they walk in the door, but they love beer, they like to work hard, and they like to talk to people, and they end up becoming so enthusiastic about what we do. And with that, of course, I'll be talking for 10 minutes about our double decocted Vienna lager and what happened in that second decoction, and eyes will glaze over, and that's okay. But
Sure.
but but ultimately they understand that we care and we put a lot of attention into our beer, and so they care too. And what you get then when you walk in is a welcoming vibe. We understand that in the world of craft beer, it's sort of bizarre to walk into a place and not have an IPA to choose from.
Yeah.
So how do we explain what's going on here? And a lot of it comes from the staff, but also we have all Lucre faucets, so people get to see the spectacle of beers actually being poured right in front of their eyes in a really cool traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
We have glassware for every single style that's thought through, uh, making sure that it's going to be the most expressive of what we have created in the brew house. We're inspecting the glassware before we're even putting beer in there, and we're just focusing on this service and dispensing of beer in a very, very unique way. And you mentioned the faucet tapping. That's another part of it. We're constantly evolving, trying to find ways that we can get the customers to interact more into our process. So on every first Tuesday of the month, we'll pull off a young version of one of our lagers from the horizontal tank, put it into a German gravity keg that we put on the bar top, and we invite other industry people that we respect to come tap the beer. We discuss how the beer differs today versus what we're striving for when it's going to be finally complete. And then that person, that industry person, brings beers that inspire them or that they've created and shares them with our customers.
Ah,
So this
industry
very
night.
beer centric kind of experiences have always been our mantra, and I think it starts with having the right staff to actually disseminate that information.
I love it. I love the investment you're making in your staff, in your team, in your people. There is nothing worse than walking into, yeah, call it what you want, a hipster coffee shop, too cool for school.
Yep.
And there's, yeah, no room at the inn, no patience at the register. It's the same as, yeah, when you walk into a brewery, you're not greeted. There's no one to help you through the tap list. When people just don't care, I've said this before, it'll kill your business over time. And it's not doing the beer industry, and particularly the craft beer industry, any favors. So I love it that you are making that investment in hospitality first and foremost, and in education. But this kind of speaking back to what you said, kind of your palate, um, your family's palate, kind of the ultimate judge, the ultimate character of the brewery. Um, like, yes, there are sometimes right and wrong answers for this thing, but part of the problem I have, as you advance through like the Cicerone program, through the BJCP program, like you said earlier, there really aren't wrong answers for how you perceive beer. Yes, there are off flavors. Yes, we have different thresholds for that. But the
Yeah.
most fun I ever have working events, working festivals, doing anything within the beer community is to encourage people that there is no wrong answer for what they're tasting, what they're experiencing, because that is ultimately unique to them. And that's part of what makes beer so special, because I don't think you find that in something like wine culture nearly as much. There's more emphasis on there is a right or wrong answer. So I think again, kind of leading with taste and encouraging education and conversation and a warm and welcoming, inviting atmosphere to do it is key. So that is every reason to visit Goldfinger.
Mhm.
So, Tom, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to ask you a few last questions I like to ask everyone just to see kind of their immediate reply. Um, Non-alcoholic beer is on the rise. There's been more talk around temperance, around sobriety in recent years, I think, in response to COVID, in response to the pandemic when you opened. So I'm just kind of curious your take on that. I think beer is the drink of moderation, and lager beer in particular is the drink of moderation. So I'm just curious, have you ever attempted to make a non-alcoholic beer? Do you have that in your tap room? And what do you think of the discourse around non-alcoholic beer and non-alcoholic everything happening right now?
Yeah. I we don't make an NA beer, but we've always offered NA beer in our tap room, brewed by somebody else. Uh, we don't sell a lot of it, but we sell it. Um,
Mhm.
and this year we're selling more of it than we've ever sold. So
Ah,
I
look at
think
that.
that that is consistent with industry trends. Um, I like with anything, I I think that to affect change, you often have to exaggerate or create some type of fear in order to actually have it be adopted. So I
Mm,
think we're in the phase. My complaint about NA is not that it exists and not that it's growing and not that people want to drink it. I think it is the almost antithesis to beer conversation that I see a lot of, that's happening a lot in the media. This almost fear that's being struck into beer drinkers that if they drink a lager with some alcohol in it, they will die.
Yeah.
A perfect example of that recently was that uh, they had found that there were some forever chemicals found in some beer, some commercial beer. And those forever chemicals, guess what? When you read the actual study, came from the source water. So some municipalities have these forever chemicals in their source water. And guess what beer is? Water, flavored water. So
Yes.
they're called forever for
95% water. Yes.
they're called forever for a reason, because you can't get rid of them. So of course they were found, and they were all linked back to the source water. And so I think that I am supportive of reporting on that stuff, because I think it's important that we provide the data and education to people about that. My issue comes in the when I searched for the actual study, the gamut of headlines for that specific study that were striking fear into a beer consumer.
Yeah.
Like, it was to the effect of, you're ingesting something that's going to kill you.
Mhm.
So you better pay attention to this. There was literally one headline that said, "Beer drinkers beware."
Yeah.
Okay, so let's educate, but you don't have to scare the beer drinker away from drinking beer entirely. So I'm more a proponent of education and research, absolutely, but then provide the data and allow people to make informed decisions about beer. Um, so uh, I am a proponent of NA beer if that's what people want to drink. We don't make one; we'll always offer it. But I just prefer that if the conversation is going to be more health conscious, which I'm always trying to be healthier, I'm trying to lose weight. Let's just do it in a way that is more inviting and less fear provoking.
Well said. Decisions uh, provoked by fear or scare tactics are not true decisions.
Right.
So I agree with you. Yeah, non-alcoholic, let it be an option. There have been improvements in quality around it. But sometimes being sober, it's like being a vegan. Everyone wants you to know about it. So
Oh yeah.
I agree that
Oh,
you could
oh
turn the
my
volume
God.
down just a little bit on this dialogue. And
Yep.
yeah, the Surgeon General didn't help with the recent warning that no amount of alcohol is safe for you. And somehow beer always gets the worst of this. There's no
Always.
dialogue. There's no dialogue around kind of, there's still kind of like, well, a glass of red wine a day is good for your heart,
Yeah.
or somehow, clear spirits are like the cleanest burning for you, despite whatever proof they might be, whereas I'll just, I'll get off my soapbox and I'll just kind of say the way I began. I still believe that beer is the drink of moderation, and lager beer in
I
particular.
would agree with you. And I think that, like I was saying in the beginning, where to affect change, there's exaggeration. And I think we're in that phase. I think that I think that there's actual data that does support that alcohol, no amount is necessarily good for you from a specific perspective. But of course, it's not talking about the full picture.
Yeah,
And is it alcohol that's like the only thing out there that there's no amount that's good for you? I bet there's a bunch of other things that we are exposed to on a daily basis that no amount is good for you either. But
most definitely.
the headlines like to talk specifically about alcohol, and like you said, beer often gets is the headline of that. But we've never promoted our beers as a healthy choice. But when people ask about that, or allude to having some sort of curiosity about uh, health impacts or caloric intake or whatever it is, we just try to educate them very basically, which is the fact that uh, the majority of the calories that you're consuming in a beer come from alcohol, it just stands to reason that lager beers, which tend to be more sessionable, are significantly less caloric, especially since they also tend to be drier. So
Yeah.
there's less residual sugar. So
Yeah.
it's a very good option. And let's be realistic. We're talking in the context of some of these, flavored seltzers and RTDs just popping off and
Yeah.
becoming a huge market. Beer is made from real ingredients that come from a farm. Um, some of those other things have, Lord knows what else in them. And the priority certainly isn't making the highest quality ethanol, or the ethanol is not derived from the highest quality products to produce those beverages. So beer wins on that front in terms of being a natural product coming from agriculture.
Very well said. Very much agreed. And you know what? You also make an interesting point just in terms of um, people don't typically talk about beer just in terms of dry, and specifically in this case lager beer, being finishing dry, finishing without residual sugar. And I think that's also an excellent point for people who do typically like whatever they're drinking to be dry, to finish clean. Lager beer is among the king of that. So here's to
Yeah,
dry beer. Maybe we should kind of take that word back from the wine world a little bit.
I agree.
Excellent point. um this one, I won't belabor it. I'm not even going to say their names again because, it's getting a little bit boring. But there's some celebrity loggers out there, and related to some various sports figures, a couple actors. And I'm just kind of curious what you think about celebrity beer culture. But specifically, let's say if you were going to brew and partner for a celebrity lager, who would it be and why?
Ah. Wow, that's a tough one. Celebrity beer culture.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was in the music industry, um, celebrity is huge in that, of course, because it's
Hmm.
highly competitive, and you might have the most talented person laying down a track in the studio, but one of the easiest ways to get them across the finish line is to just have them be featured with somebody else, or a famous person, or have that famous person mention them, and then it's the rest is history. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm not I don't think Goldfinger's depending on celebrity endorsements. We
Fair
certainly
enough.
didn't build that into our business plan. I wouldn't
Yes.
I wouldn't deny it though. I have no qualms about, people using their platform and their celebrity to uh, make make more money for themselves. I certainly don't consider those in the same realm as what we do, because we come from a undying passion for making quality beer, and that is more like a brand. I mean,
Right.
I'm pretty sure like in Hollywood, you every person now needs a liquor, a tequila with their name on
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um I don't know that I have an answer. I mean, I the re- just because one of my favorite bands growing up and continues to be is Muse and Matt Bellamy, because he has such a classical training in his music, and I do too. I was a cellist and a pianist before I started picking up the electric bass and playing
Ah.
in bands and stuff. And he has a lot of like Chopin and other classical artists in a lot of their music. I've always loved Muse, and it was one of my first concerts I went without parental supervision. So uh, if Matt Bellamy wanted to like be belting some lyrics and then grab a Goldfinger original lager while on stage, that would just be sweet. I don't know what his reach is. I mean, he's pretty
Ah.
famous, but But that would be my answer.
Muse is a great answer and good taste. So, Muse and Matt, if you're listening, Goldfinger is ready and willing. That's great. At least let it come from a place of passion and respect. Yeah, excellent choice with Muse. This one, so decoction mashing, ongoing debate among the beer industry. I know your brew house was built for decoction, and I know you list whether it's a single or a multi decoction next to your beers in the tap room. Um, I also know you made an April Fool's Day prank, basically a drop decoction in the dropper. A single drop equals one decoction, two drops, a
Yep.
double decoction. So at least you can be your tongue in cheek about this. We know you're
Yep.
built for decoction. We know you implement it in your process. We know it's part of Goldfinger. I guess just I always ask people in a single word, yes or no, decoction. We know the answer for you is yes. But speaking more to it, just tell us why, and could you achieve the same flavor, quality, or sensory profile with some of your other beers that aren't decocted through a single or like step infusion mash? Would it be possible? Just tell us a little bit more about why decoction.
No. We My answer is yes, decoction, and only achievable through decoction. Uh, I think the common misconception when it comes to the conversation about decoction is that people think about decoction in the context of under modified malt, which
Mm,
certainly plays a role in that, and that was the initial reason for decocting was you had these under modified malts, so you needed to boil it and cook it to make some of those sugars more accessible.
yeah.
So you can make excellent beer without decoction nowadays because of advancements in malting techniques, and highly modified malts allow for that. But that's not the only thing that occurs during decoction. And uh, one of the fundamental chemical reactions that happens beyond just some Maillard reactions that occur during the decoction, which help to provide a depth and flavor, is the creation of maltodextrins that only occur when you're boiling it
Mm.
for a certain period of time. And so, if you ever wondered how does this Helles that I'm drinking in this beautiful beer garden in Munich tastes sweet, yet it's not filling me up, and I keep wanting to drink more. And
Mm.
it's because you have this initial malt sweetness that is unique because of a decoction. You have this maltodextrin relationship with fermentable sugars, and it helps create that first punch of malt depth and sweetness, perceived sweetness, I should say, and
Mm.
then allows for you to balance that out through the rest of the beer drinking experience. And that is uniquely a result of decocting beers. You can still get a certain level of that through highly modified malts not decocting, but that mouth feel and that flavor, that sensory experience can only be achieved through decoction, not even putting melanoid in malt. You can't achieve that just by putting melanoid in malt.
Ah, well said and hard to argue with. So here's to maltodextrins. Okay. Moving right along. Yeah, no, for all my recent episodes, we have two camps, and everyone always has a very good answer to this question.
Yeah.
One word is not fair, but in a few sentences, I can't really debate what you just said. So yeah. Here's to the
Yeah.
maltodextrins, and here's to decoction mashing in throughout your portfolio. Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say on behalf of yourself, your family, and Goldfinger Brewing? Um, what do you want to tell someone who's deciding on their first beer at 21, who's debating their last beer at 101? What else do you want to say to them about Goldfinger?
You bring something up, and I don't know if you want to keep this in here, but when you say their last beer, this past year we've had two different people unfortunately pass away. They were customers of ours.
Wow.
And both of these people wanted Goldfinger Lager to be a part of their celebration of life. One actually celebrated at our tap room because Goldfinger beer was their favorite beer, and the other had a celebration of life in their backyard. And we made an exception for them and filled a keg for them to have in their backyard. Those were two of the most moving moments that I've had. And honestly, I could try to come up with an explanation or a description of what I want somebody to know, but I'd rather leave it at that. That clearly what we're doing here has touched people in such a way that we're even considered for like 1 second in that whirlwind of grief and also happiness and relief, etc. That we're even part of the conversation for 1 second is more than I could possibly say.
Um, Again, well said and very moving. Here is to life and lager and the celebration of life and the celebration of lager beer. Um, Most moving, Tom. No, I
Mm.
thank you for joining No Life to Lager and for sharing your story, um, start to not even finish. It's still ongoing, and we are grateful to witness it. Thank you to Tom Beckmann. Thank you to Goldfinger. If you like what you hear, just imagine how it might look. Help us get to Grodzisky Day at Goldfinger. Help us get to Dark Lager Day. Help us hit the road and make a better kind of beer show. And until we get there, I will say good night and good lager. Tom, thank you so very much.
Thank
Cheers.
you so much. Cheers.
No life till